Welcome, everybody. I want to welcome all of our viewers and also welcome our ETV alumni and current panelists. We have 5 Eastern alumni from ETV Sports that are currently with ESPN. And along with them, we have the current director of ETV Sports. Let me run through who is going to be on with us today alphabetically. Nick Akinfora, who is actually the creator and founder, so to speak, of ETV Sports about 8 years ago. Brian Dostler, Alex Gabriel, Damon Gray, Jack Petrucci, who is our most recent graduate, and Jared Saltis, who is the current director of ETV Sports. My name is Bob Molta. I'm the Sports Information Director. This is a production of ETV Sports, and this will be about ETV Sports, which is a little bit unusual, but we thought it was important that the viewership, that people realize what goes into ETV Sports and how it began and how it progressed. And as I mentioned, all 5 of our alumni ETV Sports directors are with ESPN now, which is, as we all know, all of us know that ESPN is the gold standard for sports production, nationally and internationally. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to start with Jared Saltis. Jared is a junior, one of the 4 directors of ETV from New Hartford, Connecticut. Jared, for people who may not know, what is ETV Sports?
So essentially ETV Sports, it's a student-run broadcast on campus. It was created by, like you mentioned, Bob, was created by Nick Akinfora about 8 or so years ago. And now since we've grown it into something even bigger than what it started, we try to live stream as many of the NCAA Division III varsity sports teams as we can. It's a whole ordeal. We've got 2 announcers, we've got a director, graphics coordinator, replay man, 3 camera operators, and in special occasions we have stats guys and we have sideline reporters. So it's as close to a professional production as you can get on a college campus. And it's a great way to prepare yourself for being in the sports production field down the road in the future.
Jared, how did you get involved with ETV Sports?
One of the other directors is actually Ryan Gable. He joined a little bit earlier than I did. I joined second semester of my freshman year. I had kind of heard about it, and I was still trying to figure out kind of what I wanted to do in my freshman year. And then I was able to find Ryan, and he was able to point me in the direction of Jack Petrucci, Dom Conti, and Emily St. Lawrence, and they kind of took me under their wing. And I worked on camera for a while. And then in my sophomore year, I was able to get a lot more involved with production, doing some announcing, some directing, producing. So then here I stand today as one of the directors in the first semester of my junior year.
Jared, what's the makeup right now of ETV Sports in terms of, can you talk about the other directors?
Yeah, so of course there's myself. Then we got Kyle Smith, Ryan Gable, and Jake Bolduc. As far as what we each bring to the table, I mean, I'm one of the main announcers. Me and Ryan, we do most of the announcing for the live streaming events. And I like to focus on the post-production stuff too. Packages, longer documentaries, YouTube highlights, Instagram highlights. That's kind of where I thrive in. So I try to focus on that as much as possible, aside from the announcing. And then we got Kyle, who is our main graphics guy. He coordinates all the graphics for the live events, and he does also the graphics for our Instagram page, which is very big for game day graphics, post game graphics, and certain award graphics throughout the year. Ryan Gable, he's one of our other directors. That is also one of the other main announcers along with me. We do most of the announcing for all the live streaming events, and he kind of also does a lot of YouTube highlights and Instagram highlights, and is able to kind of work in other packages and stuff. And then Jake Bolduc, he is kind of our Swiss Army knife, we like to call him, for live streaming. He does pretty much anything. He'll announce, direct, he'll do a replay, camera. So we can pretty much count on him to do anything in a tight situation.
Jared, I'm not sure if you came to Eastern as a comm major. You were cutting out on me a little bit, so you might have mentioned it, but um, are you more certain now as to what you might want to do with this experience that you've gained with ETV Sports?
Most certainly, Bob. I mean, I came here um, as a communication major, not really knowing what I wanted to do within the field. I knew it was so broad that I could have easily picked something else up out of it. But then I got pointed in the direction to join ETV Sports, and that I kind of found a passion for something that I didn't really know I had. I mean, I'd always loved sports growing up, but I never really knew I was going to be into the production side of it until I joined ETV Sports and saw how professional it was and saw all the opportunities that there were throughout all the alumni here, like the 5 that you see at the top of the screen right now, that they've been able to go on and work at the worldwide leader in sports and just what they've been able to do throughout their career.
I think it's just so rewarding. I know it's so rewarding for me that to see you guys who are at ESPN now, how you came in with you had a passion for sports your whole life, and you came in to ETV Sports and just worked so hard and were so creative. Money was not an object. You got paid a little bit, but nothing close to what you should have. But you had a passion. And I remember when Nick first got the job at ESPN, Nick Akinfora, it was like we could not believe, like, somebody from Eastern is at ESPN. And now it's snowballed. And not only do we have our 5 current panelists at ESPN, but we have a number of other people as well in different roles. So Nick Akinfora is going to sort of serve as the moderator the rest of the way, and then he'll send it back to me at the end, and I'll finish up again with Jarrett. But Nick Akinfora, as we mentioned at the top, was really the creator of ETV Sports. He's now involved with ESPN Next. And he's in his 5th year at ESPN. He started as the college sports and Sports Center, moved on to Outside the Lines in E60. And then recently, probably 18 months ago, Nick, you got the job as ESPN Next. But Nick, before you start talking about your role at ESPN, just talk about how the whole thing started. And I do want to preface it with one thing, that initially, when we first started streaming games, we would have one camera and one computer. And then one day in the office, I'll make this very brief. One day in the office, I got a phone call from a supervisor in another department that said, we're looking to hire a student here, but he keeps talking about sports. He loves sports. It's his passion. He really, really enjoys sports. And the supervisor said to me, I think he should be working with you. And then about a half an hour later, Nick showed up, and we talked about what he might want to do with us. And then I said, well, we have a tip-off tournament coming up soon, and we're looking for someone to be the on-air guy, not knowing if Nick had any interest in doing that. And he goes, yeah, I'll give it a shot. And from there, it was history. So, Nick, you want to go from there?
Bullet, it's funny you say that, because whenever I think about that time, I remember when I met with the person from the career department, they said, yeah, it's a guy with a mustache, you can't miss him. So just make sure you walk down the hill, you'll be able to find him pretty quickly. No, I mean, you hit on it right there. Once I got the opportunity to do that, I really never wanted to walk away from it. So yeah, we started with the laptop and camcorder. And I think at that point, there may have been a very basic scoreboard on there for graphics. But from there, I was able to work with guys like Paul Melmer, Andrew Utterback, Bob yourself, the many people in our athletic administration, Nick Messina. There's many people involved in really assisting, our team and what we wanted to do. I knew we wanted to kind of take it to the next level, but wasn't sure what was even available at that point. And that's really where Paul kind of stepped in and really lent some great advice to us in terms of the technology that we would be able to get our hands on. And once we were able to get a new tech TriCaster, it was a whole new world. And granted, at that time, we were still broadcasting in standard, but it was just really cool to know we could take a jump from what we were at and continue to grow from there. And a lot of credit, to guys like, Damon and Brian, who hopped right on. I mean, I think once they got involved, I knew I had some guys with me that were really interested in helping and bringing it to that next level. And I think without them, it wouldn't have gotten there, along with the help of many other people. But there is that investment from them early on that really proved like, hey, there could be something here. So over the years, I mean, obviously we've seen the technology and the type of content that got put out grow substantially. But what I found to be the most rewarding, part of my 4 years at Eastern was the growth of the team and what we were able to create. That being, internships that I think it was, Bob, it might have been in the summer when I was working with you in the office that we talked about, what can we do, right? There's a lot of kids that, aren't able to get that internship at maybe ESPN or NBC Sports or WWE or something, somewhat local. What's something we can offer to them on campus that might, fulfill that, that internship that they're looking for. So having that along with a lot of people that volunteered was a huge help with the growth of it. And it's crazy to think when Jared said, it was 8-9 years ago. It's funny to think that far back. It feels like it was just yesterday. And to think 5 years at ESPN is even crazier. As I'm sure the other guys can attest to their careers already. But no, it was an amazing time at Eastern. And I think that, a lot of people involved in it. I don't think there's one specific person that we give credit to. Bob, I know you don't like it, but a lot of it goes to you because you were able to push for us, to the administration, to people in the communication department, and have our backs. And that's just, a skill that not a lot of people have in leadership. And that's just having the backs and support of the people that work with you and for you. So we appreciate that. But, I want to get to everyone else on the panel now. So just to kind of give some brief information about myself and reiterate a little bit about what Bob said. Started it with ETV Sports back my freshman year in 2011 at Eastern. Graduated in 2015. I actually started my career with the American Athletic Conference in Providence, Rhode Island for actually about a month before I got the offer from ESPN. So I started in August of 2015. I worked with our college sports and really Sports Center units, Baseball Tonight units for the first couple of years. Moved on to Outside the Lines in E60, so went from more of a live studio production to more investigative and feature long-form storytelling. And then from there, in May of 2019, was promoted to ESPNX coordinator, our leadership development program at ESPN that all the gentlemen that are on here from ESPN are in or have been a part of. In terms of just some of the challenging parts of working at ESPN, especially on the production side of it, I think it's just the grind. And all these guys can attest to that. There is a grind day in and day out. Working in the television business, it's unlike anything else. And I know, everyone says there's difficult parts of their job, and I'm sure there are, but to know that you are on live television, you're trying to turn around content, within sometimes seconds, I think that's really the most difficult part of the job. And I think in terms of adjustment is being even more ready than I was at Eastern. I made sure to always prepare and make sure that I was, there well before a game would start, making sure we're ready to go. But at ESPN, like Bob, you hit on, right, the Mecca, the gold standard, you have to be even more prepared than you ever thought you could be. There are days that I would come to games 2 hours before a game thinking, oh, that's plenty of time. Nowadays, it's like, I had the opportunity to go to San Jose to work the national championship between Clemson and Alabama. We were there 7.5 hours before the game, which ended up being almost a 14, 15-hour day. So, just to think about the amount of preparation that goes into it, I think was the biggest adjustment. Not to say that there wasn't much preparation at Eastern, but it's amazing to see how much more you do when you get to that next level in your career. But I'm going to start off with Damon. Damon, if you could just take us through your years at ETV, your start date at ESPN, what you've been able to do, and just some of those challenges and, biggest adjustments for you.
So I started at ETV in 2013. It was my sophomore year. I saw a little job description online and I applied for it. Got it, met Nick and Bob and the whole crew, and spent the rest of my ETV years through 2016 is when I graduated. In January 2016, I got an internship at ESPN. In between that, I also had an internship with the Connecticut Sun, which was a great time. But I had my internship with ESPN in January, got a full-time job in April, and I've been here ever since, bouncing between roles from basic work, VO unit on Sports Center, all the way up to working on the very first fantasy football marathon. That was a blast because no one really had any idea what that would even entail. And then working my way over to the international department on ESPN FC, the daily soccer show that's now on ESPN Plus. And now I'm doing live events for soccer. So anything soccer on TV and ESPN Plus, I'm a part of that. So it's been fun. One of the more difficult things, especially as of recent, is just adjusting on the fly. Things can change at any given moment. You could be assigned one thing, and then next thing you know, you're doing something else within an hour's notice. So like Nick said, it's the daily grind. That's just part of it now. It's part of everybody's life right now. So that's just, it's been fun. And one of the fun adjustments actually is you do so much at ETV. Like you're cutting the video, you're doing the play-by-play, you're making the highlights, you're doing the graphics. When you go to somewhere like ESPN, you have help. You know, you're not editing the video anymore. You're just cutting the highlights and you send it to an editor. So that's like one of the mental adjustments you actually have to do.
Thanks, Damian. I agree. I think that's a difficult part, right? Because you take so much ownership when you're Eastern, which is great. And when you get to ESPN, there's kind of that step back where you say, hey, okay, well, I'm only handling this, and now I can hand it off to others, a part of our team, to take care of it. Brian, I'm going to kick it over to you to talk to us about the same.
Well, I graduated from Eastern in 2017, and I got the job. I interned in the fall of 2016 at ESPN, and then on my graduation day in May of 2017, I got the call that I got a full-time job. So that was pretty cool. But, you know, I feel like I've worked every hour at ESPN. I started in highlights, so I was working nights, and then I went to Mike and Mike / Golic and Wingo. So I was in at work at 3 a.m. And then from there, I went to SportsCenter AM. So again, that was 3 a.m., 4 a.m. start time to noon. Then I moved over to College Game Day for this previous college basketball season. And now I'm currently on Rise working at nights. So now I'm working 6 p.m. to 3 a.m. So my whole year has just been, I'm working literally all over the clock, it feels like, just based on my schedules. But that's kind of what's cool about ESPN is it keeps you on your toes. You know, like I've been fortunate enough to work on a bunch of different teams and departments or teams through my 3+ years at ESPN already. So I've been able to get a lot. And as far as like nerve-wracking parts of the job on Rise, like 2 or 3 times I cut the opening tease for the show. So for those of you that don't know what that is, it's literally like if you're watching the NBA finals or if you're watching an NBA game on ESPN and the game ends at 11:05, at 11:06 that tease comes on because that means SportsCenter starting. And the tease is 3 topics, 3 biggest topics we're going to talk about. And then at the very end, there's like a cool montage to kind of cap it off. And basically, essentially, the job is the person doing the tease needs to know everything that happens in sports at night. With that being said, you have plenty of help with people in screening where we work and things like that. But sometimes it can be nerve-wracking. Some nights it's fine and you get it in the rundown with plenty of time. But other times it can be a challenge, but it certainly keeps you on your toes, and it's a lot of fun to do.
Awesome. Thanks, Brian. Alex, I'm going to kick it to you. And when you talk about your time at ESPN, hit a little bit more on Rise, just so the people watching us can get a better idea for what that unit really does.
So I feel super lucky that I even got to be a part of ETV because when I went to Eastern, I knew I wanted to be a comm major, but my goal was to write screenplays. I had this outlandish dream that that's what I wanted to do. And I told a professor of mine day one, and he told me to check out ETV. And I had no idea what it was. I didn't know that it was more of a live news show. I just heard TV, and I was like, let's go over there and see what it's about. And immediately was blown away by how professional it was, like we've touched upon earlier. But then Brian Dossler actually pulled me aside and was like, do you have any interest in sports? I was like, I played basketball in high school. Like, yeah, like I could. And he goes, well, there's ETV Sports as well. And if you want to try to announce some games and volunteer and point the camera at the ball, we could use the help. And I think I went to the first game that weekend, and that was my freshman year. And I was a member of ETV from that point until I graduated. And I started with ESPN January of 2019 as an intern. And then was hired full-time that March. And initially when I started working for ESPN, it was SportsCenter highlights and digital highlights for all their social media platforms. And then quickly I found out what Rise was, and I knew I wanted to do that. And what Rise is essentially we produce content to entice the viewers to watch more programming is essentially the main focus of Rise. So like Brian brought up the SportsCenter tees, the most important thing in the show, first thing the viewers see, meant to keep them, to allow them to keep watching SportsCenter. On top of that, we also do the bumps. So into commercial breaks, what's coming up next on SportsCenter. The anchor will read over whatever topics are coming up, and our responsibility is to produce the video to accommodate that VO from the anchor. And then another main duty on Rise is we have what's called specialty content, which is essentially gets shows from point A to point B. So, for example, if a show wants to talk about LeBron's fourth NBA title, they could ask Rise to produce a 30, 40 to 45-second video that encompasses and provides context to the viewer on LeBron's 4 rings, and that'll lead them into their segment that they want to talk about. So those are the primary goals of Rise, and it's a creative group. I love doing it. I love going to work every day because it feels like you're a member of a team. It's a very similar feeling that I got from ETV Sports. It's a close-knit, it feels like a family. It's a grind, just like everything else, but it's for sure very enjoyable. The most difficult thing, as Nick mentioned earlier, the tight turnaround environment, where another thing that Rise produces are recaps of live events. So we could have a NBA game going on, and the producer will need a recap of that event in recently 13 minutes after the game ends. You have to be able to put all the video together, all the sound together, the music underneath it, and get it to an editor, and they have to edit it, and it has to be on live TV in 13 minutes. And environments like that are stressful, but they build character for sure. And I can thank ETV for keeping me on my toes for those live events and getting me ready for those types of situations. But as far as adjustments go, I couldn't agree with Damon anymore. The ownership of the work, where in ETV, you're doing almost everything from the pre-production to production to post-production. It's all you, it's all your team. Whereas at ESPN, you need to rely on your on your teammates who can be better in areas where you may lack, and you have to be willing to be able to pass your work on and trust the guy next to you to bring it home in whatever way they can.
Awesome. Thanks, Alex. Jack, how about you?
As Bob alluded to, the most recent grad. I graduated just in May of 2020. But yeah, my first, when I was going to orientation my freshman year at Eastern, I got an email from Brian kind of giving me the landscape of what ETV was. And the first day I got on campus, the first volleyball game I had, I went and volunteered. I spent my freshman year volunteering with ETV Sports, doing all the duties Jarrett mentioned, camera work, a little announcing, working the TriCaster. And then was the assistant director my sophomore year, and then the director from junior year on out. Similar to Brian, I started at ESPN in the fall of my senior year as an intern, and then was hired on in December full-time. So I've been there in total with the company just over a year. And I started I've just worked in the SportsCenter at night pod, to say the least. I started out in highlights, and also, like Alex mentioned, cutting digital highlights and working in the VO sound department. And then in June, I got moved over to the Rise team. So I've been there for about 4 months. As Alex mentioned, cutting bumps, teases, and a little bit of specialty content as well. But yeah, I would say the biggest thing, which has been a common theme, is just the tight turnaround. Alex mentioned with recaps, trying to get that on air, as soon as the game ends. And when you're working in highlights too, there's sometimes when your game could end and you have to put a highlight on in 3 minutes, which is kind of crazy to think about. And it's a lot at first, that turnaround to, get everything organized and on air. But it's very rewarding. And along with like it being rewarding and seeing it on air, it teaches you great turnaround skills. And I think all of us can say when we were at ETV, it's all right, this game ends, like, let's try and get this highlight out as quick as we could. Let's try to get this post-game graphic out as quick as we could. And that quick turnaround mindset carries over quite well to ESPN, although it's not, the exact turnaround that your deadlines call for. It's the quick turnaround mentality that I think kind of helped me a lot, and it's one of the big things that helped me translating from ETV Sports over to ESPN.
Good. Thanks, Jack. Guys, let's just talk a little bit more about kind of more in detail here about our time at Eastern and kind of the things that got us prepared for our positions. First thing that I like to bring up, and it's just due to the fact that I actually went to Eastern as a physical education major, changed to a business major thinking that would be the smart idea, and then changed from business to communication once I had the opportunity to work with Bob. So take me through, when you guys got to Eastern, were you a comm major? And if you weren't, what were you originally? But then once you became a comm major, what were your hopes and plans kind of early on in your mind before you actually kind of grew through ETV Sports? Damon, I'll start with you, same order.
So, I mean, I went into Eastern as a communication major, minor in Canadian studies, by the way. That didn't happen. But yeah, I went in wanting to go into TV, and I got into the TV club a little bit late, actually. But yeah, I'm probably one of the few ones here that went in with that mindset of this is what I wanted to do. This was my goal, and this is what I ended up being.
Ryan, how about yourself?
And I knew I was a comm major. I knew I wanted to work in sports broadcasting. In high school, I actually had my own sports TV show that I produced with a couple other buddies. But what kind of sold me was when I was looking at colleges, and it was an open house, and it was the first time I met Dr. Utterback, and I was talking to him, and he was like, if you want to work at a place like ESPN or NBC or places like that, like, you got to be here every Thursday night for ETV Club for the TV show. So from right there, I knew that was my place, and I think I emailed Nick and Bolt the first week I was on campus, and just kind of took off from there.
Alex, how about you?
Yeah, so like I mentioned, I went in with knowing I wanted to be a comm major, but for a totally different purpose. I wanted to write. And I still had a writing minor, and I still pursued that all throughout college. But honestly, Brian really explained, he was like, if you dedicate yourself to this and you work hard, you can look at the track record, and like, people are at ESPN. It was at the time he was interning. Nick worked really hard with ETV Sports, and he's at ESPN. Damon worked really hard, and he's at ESPN. I worked really hard, and I'm there now. And that kind of sold me on going in that direction, because I was like, I would never pass up the opportunity to be working for ESPN. And that's kind of how I pursued, like, why I wanted to be with ETV so much all throughout college.
Awesome. Jack?
And I think, like a lot of us on this call, I went in as a comm major, but I went in as, all right, I want to be on air. And I quickly learned where that's, of course, an attainable goal that you want to do. But I was also, told by everyone on this call, try to be as versatile as you possibly can. And that's what really, I didn't have a ton of, editing or post-production experience coming into Eastern. But that's, what was really hammered home to me was, learn production, learn, your technical skills, how to edit. And I think that was a big thing for me that was pushing me in that direction. And that's what ultimately got me on the path where, of course, everyone on this call was, to the post-production lifestyle, and which got me the skills ready to have an internship and other position at ESPN.
I find it interesting because all of us had that same experience where we enjoyed our time on air, right? And I think at some point, I'm sure all of us have felt that that's the career I want to go into, right? But I think as we all grew, we realized that there were opportunities behind the camera that could be just as, the satisfaction you can get out of what you're producing behind the scenes can sometimes just match that on the other end. It is funny to hear that, though, because you do have a lot of people that want to be on air, and I think we all would say we would never discourage it, right? But it's a tough field, and the same thing goes for behind the scenes. But I do find it interesting that a lot of us have went after that career path up front and kind of change it. And I think for me personally, that kind of changed around you know, the time when Damon and I started working on John DeCasanova's documentary. I think that was really, it kind of changed my mind into what I wanted to go into. You know, we kind of already talked about how we all got involved with ETV, but I kind of want to pose the question to you guys. What made you feel you could step away from the on-air stuff and go behind the scenes?
So, I mean, I enjoyed my time on air. I knew I never really wanted to be on air, but I enjoyed it. It was, like you said, the DeCasanova documentary that Nick and I did it was really interesting and a little bit of life-changing too, just because the idea that originally it was supposed to be just like a quick little story on the website, and then it turned into a full-fledged documentary, right? And then Nick and I said, hey, that was fun, let's do it again. So we did it. So we did it again with the story about the rugby team as well. And that was awesome. And it really kind of helped me be like, okay, the behind the camera stuff, really, that's it.
Awesome. Brian?
Really honest, it was Nick and Damon just saying, go behind the camera. Like there's just so many more jobs available in production. Like there's 2 people calling a game, but there's 50 people working that same game that are producing all the same thing. So obviously there's just, your odds are better at behind the camera. So, you know, these guys have the DeCasanova project as like their turning point. My turning point was just Nick and Damon saying, just go behind the camera.
Alex?
I didn't have a turning point. I never enjoyed being on camera. It's scary. It's stressful. There's a lot of anxiety. Oh, when you're behind the camera, no one knows you're there. It's perfect. And so I never wanted to be on camera, but I put together, when I knew I wanted to do behind the camera work, I put together like a 20-minute feature on Tarshy Brown, and it was super enjoyable. Loved doing it. Loved interviewing him. Loved editing it. And that's when I was like, wow, there's something here that I want to pursue.
Jack, how about you?
So by the time, you know, I was a freshman and sophomore, that kind of became the ETV standard. Was here's our content and here's how it's done. And as mentioned before, I never really had a lot of editing experience coming in. But then, you know, first starting and making, you know, Eastern highlights for our social media pages, I kind of got accustomed to it and thought like, wow, this is something I really enjoy. And that led me to cut a couple features as well, with, you know, a number of different teams, with Eastern Connecticut cutting, you know, short little montage pieces for our social media too. But I just think like that standard, which everyone on this call set, was something that I knew I wanted to keep up, and something that I didn't know how much I would actually enjoy it. And it turned out, you know, great for me. I loved what I did at Eastern Connecticut on the post-production side, and I love what I do now. That's creating content on multiple platforms with ESPN.
Awesome. A couple more questions, guys. We'll go around. One I kind of want to combine here into 2 and 1. So obviously we all kind of hit on a little bit some of those summer jobs or internships we had while at Eastern. But what have you guys taken from, and you could hit on some of those internships very briefly in terms of that, but what have you learned from those internships, your time with ETV Sports? What are some skills that you've been able to take from there that you've been able to put in place at ESPN in your career? I mean, for me personally, I could say one thing with ETV Sports and working with all of you guys was the ability to learn, you know, different parts of leadership and learning how to lead. I can say, for one, there were times when I started out that I was horrible at delegating. I didn't know where to delegate responsibility, right? Because when I first started, everything was kind of owned by myself and working with Bob on that stuff. And when Damon joined, when Brian joined, there's more people joining. Now I have to try to figure out, like we talked about, that ownership part of it. How can you delegate? And there was a discussion I'll never forget that I had with Bob my senior year. It was, I think, my final semester. And I said, you know, hey, I'm going to start focusing on internships and full-time jobs now. I'm going to lend everything to Damon and Brian and let them take everything on from here on out. And Bob couldn't agree more. Was it difficult for me? Of course it was, right? Because you want to be as involved as possible, but you also know that, you know, it's important for other people to get that experience. And something that I've learned is if the person that takes over for you does better than you did, that means you've done your job. And I think that clearly shows in, the pipeline we've created. But Damon, I'll start with you. What skills or what skill have you taken from maybe some internships and jobs in the past while you were at Eastern that you've been able to take to ESPN?
I mean, I kind of laugh at the leadership one because I think Brian will remember this well. I was kind of like, it was my senior year. Brian was taking over for next year. I said, Brian, you're in charge of this game. And if you have any questions, call me. Knowing, please don't call me because I want you to figure it out. Brian had an issue. He called me and I answered. I just said, figure it out. And he managed to figure it out after that. So it was a little bit of the leadership aspect and learning how to handle things yourself at ETV Sports is so key in that process. You did the same with me. I remember a couple instances where we had a lacrosse game where there was issues and figured it out. And that was just kind of, it worked. Another thing I do actually want to point out a little bit to the last one was Nick was at ESPN when I was a senior and everyone else behind us. So Nick was in highlights then. So one of the things that really helped us was Nick was in highlights. We were showing him our highlights and he was giving us feedback on how to make ETV Sports highlights better. And that was also, just having like that insight and how to properly do a highlight was so key too.
Brian?
Yeah, Damon, to kind of piggyback on the highlights, that's something I constantly completely forgot. Like Nick literally gave us like a whole packet. It was like 4 or 5 pages of like how to cut an ESPN highlight, and they were coming at Eastern. So that was very helpful. But yeah, so like while I was at Eastern, I also worked for the American Athletic Conference football media day and the women's conference tournaments for basketball, Mohegan Sun, the Rockettes, and the Connecticut Sun. So all those experiences of just kind of just being around people in the business, I think helped me at ESPN. Because I'd been there, obviously it was important to do something at ETV Sports, but then to actually go out into the real world and kind of just kind of how it interacts in a basically a real job and all that. But yeah, so all those definitely prepared me for the moments at ESPN, and yeah, that's all.
Alex, how about you?
Yeah, so I didn't do any internships outside of ESPN, but I did freelance work for Hot 93.7, doing basically we'd show up and not have any clue who we were interviewing or where we were interviewing. And as stressful as that is, the biggest thing I took away from it was problem solving, which, as we all know, is so huge in our industry. Just real time, on your toes, problem solving. And that was really the first, because I was still younger at that point. I wasn't the director of sports broadcasting yet. I didn't have any main roles with ETV. That was the first experience I had where it was like, show up and you need to figure this out really quickly or important people are going to get upset. And that was a great learning experience for me, and that helped me with ETV and now into my career at ESPN.
Jack?
So I'll start with the 2 summer internships I had. My sophomore year to junior year, I was an intern with the New Britain Bees. And then my junior to senior year, I was an intern with the Hartford Yard Goats. And as much as the technical and production skills I learned there was important, I think the biggest thing was like the networking skills that I learned there. Brian kind of touched on this briefly, but working with the New Britain Bees and learning from their general manager and their video production coordinator, that ultimately gave me connections that helped me land the Hartford Yard Goats position next year. And then getting to work with their video production manager and their team who has so much experience in the field and so many connections. I'm sure Nick will touch on this more, but that's the way this network, and that's the way of this field is how you network with people in various, wherever you go, whether that's ETV or any internships you land along the way. So as much as like ETV Sports, I met a ton of great people. Of course, everyone on this call has been a huge factor in where I am in my career, but also, wherever you go, like I said, with the Bees, with the Argos, when I helped out with the NCAA tournament when I came to Hartford last March, it's just networking, meeting with people, and growing those connections that you'll keep forever in your career, really.
Yeah, I think you make a good point, Jack. The networking part of it is so important, and the credit goes to all of you guys that have kept up that network, right? Like, I was never in school with Jack and Alex, but there were still times where they would reach out, whether it be email, text, right, and talk and ask questions. And the same thing goes with Jared, I'm sure, for you guys. So it's important to keep those connections and relationships. Just to wrap up, give me a memory, good or bad, hopefully it's good, from your time from Eastern, working with ETV Sports. I'm going to go last for this one. So Damon, I'm going to go with you first.
I mean, doing the DeCasanova story was it was crazy. I mean, and then being able to do the game where he came back, and the media coverage that had, the local media coverage that had, and him finally scoring a goal a couple games later, and just how far that story and the rugby story went. It's just, those are memories I'll always remember for sure.
Ryan?
Just going to, it's just kind of cliche, but just going to work every day and just working with everybody. It was a blast. Like, obviously working with Nick and Damon and Alex and Jack here, but also two of my roommates who are my closer friends, Pat Murtha and Spencer Davis. Pat is also at ESPN. He's working on the bottom line. Spencer's an editor at WTNH in New Haven. Just working with those guys, it was truly a blast. And if I had to pick one event, it would probably be my junior year. We hosted the baseball regionals, and we broadcasted 17 games in 3 days. And I announced, I think, 15 or 16 of them. And unfortunately, my voice was gone by the championship game. My voice was shot. But also that same weekend, right before the tournament started, Paul Melmer contacted me and said that we had an HD TriCaster for the following. Like, we were granted the money to get the HD TriCaster for the following season. So that was also pretty cool.
Alex?
Yeah, I mean, like everyone talked, like the kind of like team feeling that you got with ETV was incredible through all 4 of my years. But I did this side thing called, that was like attached to ETV, called Inside Eastern Athletics. That was the most fun 6 months I've ever had. And I'll never forget ever. I raced the Lasso sisters in the pool, and it was one of the most fun days I had in college. It was like this, fun little game of athletes versus non-athletes, and I just had a blast doing it, and it was a great day.
Jack?
So I've been pretty fortunate. Like, in my 4 years, we've had just like a ton of like unbelievable events, whether that was like hosting the men's basketball regional my sophomore year or the super regional for softball on my junior year. But to me, the one that sticks out the most, at the end of my junior year, getting to travel to the national championship to Tyler, Texas with the softball team was incredible. And I think the thing about that was, like, on top of the team being so welcoming to myself and Dom Conti, I think the biggest thing I'll take away from that is anytime we've traveled with a team, we've always asked, we've always pitched like, hey, we'd like to go along if that's okay. And hours after the super regional ended, I got a text from Coach Pepin, the head softball coach, that said, all right, who's coming to Texas? So, and that just put a huge smile on my face, knowing that, that's kind of the bar we set. And it's like, wow, like, we have the notoriety that now, coaches are reaching out to us to go. And it was unbelievable. I mean, the atmosphere was insane. Like I mentioned, the softball team, the coaching staff, a huge thank you. Was so welcoming to myself and Dom. And that was easily one of the best weeks I had, if not the best week I had at college. And getting the coverage we got, being able to keep the parents and the fans up to date when we were down there was awesome. So, like I said, been pretty fortunate with the amount of events we've hosted, but that one sticks out in particular.
Definitely. Brian, you got?
Yeah, I just want to say one more thing before you finish up. I should also mention that I met my current girlfriend, Lupe Marquez, through more ETV news and ETV Sports, and things are going well. We've been dating for over 3 years now, so ETV News Sports, it also could be, you know, a connection there later on in life. So it can cover a lot of bases, your job and your love life.
This is true. This is true. I think you guys hit on a lot of stuff, Damon. I couldn't agree more with the piece on John, right? I think there was a lot of impact that we were able to have on him and his family and friends. I think the comfort that we were able to bring to Coach Ray and the rugby team was something that, you know, I think that was a big learning moment for me personally, that it's great to win the awards and get the attention on pieces, right? But like when you can have an impact and you could comfort families and friends of those that they lost, I mean, that was meaningful. You guys also said, you know, the team aspect of it. So I think that for me is right up there, just due to the fact that we've created long-term relationships and friendships along the way here, and are still connected in many ways, which being at ESPN is great. And I'd say, like, for me, the memories just continue to go, right? Like, I think every time we see growth and we see another person come out of Eastern, it doesn't have to be ESPN. It could be to WWE. It could be to NBC. It could be anywhere. The growth that we've been able to see ETV Sports have is the long-lasting memory and new memories that I think we're getting every year. Jack, I'll toss it back to you. I know you wanted to say something else.
No, I'll just say one more thing. I think the most important thing, I think, in my career was you guys coming back. And, you know, when you guys graduated, Alex and Brian, who I worked with directly, but even Nick and Damon, you guys never forgot, like, what ETV Sports was. And that had such an impact on my career, whether it was just looking at a quick highlight, giving me advice for, you know, internships to land. That by far was the most important thing in my career. And I think that is what's the most important and the best thing about this program is, you know, everyone comes back. And I hope to, me being a recent graduate, I hope to instill that in the 4 directors with, you know, with Jared, Kyle, Jake, and Ryan Gable. And I hope that, I just want to mention, like, that is what makes ETV such a great program. It's so vital to everyone's development.
Thanks, Jack. That was great. And I'll speak on behalf of all of us. Bob, thank you. I mean, there's no way any of it could be possible without you. I know you don't like to hear that, but it is true. And it's, you know, you say no, but we're going to say yes. So without you, we would not be able to do and get to where we are. You've taught us more than anything. So we appreciate it. And I'll hand it back to you to wrap things up.
And I wanted to emphasize again, and I'm glad Jack sort of emphasized it as well, is that the most rewarding thing of being involved with you guys is the fact that once you leave Eastern, once you leave ETV Sports, you don't forget about it. Like when Damon said that, you know, Nick, you contacted him about a highlight, how to make a highlight, or anyone contacted him about, we saw the show, we saw the stream, you guys are doing a great job. This is my suggestion, maybe do this and this. Or, you know, we saw your highlights and they're really good, but how about trying this, this, and this? And as Jack said, to reiterate that, the whole family atmosphere of ETV Sports is just an amazing thing. And I thank you guys for that. Especially thank you for following up on the people that are here now, because as Jack said, that means everything to them to know that you guys are following them. Even though you're at ESPN, you're at the highest level possible, you're still following what ETV Sports is doing. And I just wanted to wrap it up again, going back to with Jared. Jared, we didn't talk about this beforehand, but you are one of our top play-by-play guys, and you came in with that mindset. That's what you liked. But listening to any of these current ESPN people, does that change your thinking at all about, hey, maybe I'll look more in the production end of it?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I mean, when I came in last year, and was really when I started to get involved, my sophomore year was where I really started to get involved with like production and announcing and stuff. And I really took a liking to announcing. I got to do the play-by-play for the men's basketball team last year. That was great. And then got to do a bunch of other announcing for other sports. But then what really turned me in that direction, I was able to produce a piece on a decade in review of the men's and women's basketball team. And just being able to interview Coach Beerley and Coach Gaitner. They were great with it. And just being able to sift through all the footage that actually these 5 guys were all the ones I was sifting through their footage. So it was kind of
Yeah.
with that. And I was able to include that in there. So that the final product of that ended up coming out great. And it was just kind of what swayed me in the direction to really get into the production aspect of it. And then since then, I've created a bunch of other pieces, Instagram highlights, YouTube highlights, a couple other like short packages / pieces, which has kind of swayed me in the direction to focus more on production.
Well, let's talk a little bit about this, Jared, is the fact that, as we all know, things are different this fall. None of our Eastern fall teams are playing outside competition. And actually, that's one thing that prompted this panel discussion, is that Nick contacted me and said, hey, I know you guys might be looking for some content. You're not streaming games every single day. How about if we do this panel discussion, which was great. I think our viewers are really going to enjoy it. But Jared, just because there's no games doesn't really mean at all that ETV Sports is not still active. Talk about some of the things that you've had to do to create content.
So, I mean, we've had to, obviously, like you said, be kind of creative with it. We've done a few packages. There was a few charity golf tournaments at the beginning of the year that the sports teams, they put on to raise money for their program. We did a package on one of those. They are still doing some inter-squad scrimmages on all the fall sports teams, and even some of the spring sports teams. So we've been able to actually live stream those, because obviously fans aren't really allowed, so the parents and all the relatives still want to see it. So we've been able to stream those. We're still trying to make as many Instagram highlights as we can to try and get content out. But it's just about kind of trying to be creative. Like even going back to the end of the spring, we did a top 15 countdown of the best moments over the last 4 years. That was really fun to do. And then we actually got involved with SAC and doing some of their stuff at the end of last year. But this year we're still staying busy. Obviously not as much as usual, usually doing 3 or 4 games a week, but we're trying to make as much content as possible. And there's definitely ways that we can stay busy throughout this semester, even though we're not streaming as many games.
You know, Jared, I would have to think that ETV Sports is a little bit at a crossroads, because guys, I don't know if you know at the panel, but we were not allowed to offer an internship this fall, because I think the comm people, Andrew Utterback, were afraid that if everybody was sent home in the middle of the semester, no interns were going to be able to complete their internship. So we're sort of caught in the middle right now, because we don't know what the spring or even winter is going to entail. Right now, we have no interns for that reason. Now, Jared, what do you think the game plan might be, you know, looking ahead to the spring, since there's so much uncertainty?
I mean, I think come springtime, hopefully there's been rumor that may be a possibility of partial basketball season. So hopefully that's something that we can do. And of course, it seems like all of these teams are still going to continue to do these inter-squad scrimmages, fall and spring teams included. So I think spring is where we're going to see us be a lot more busy than we are now, because that's going to be when the spring sports are kicking up. And I think fall teams plan on doing some games in the spring as well. So I maybe we could be looking at 2 or 3 games a week. And then with 2 or 3 games a week, that means there's more highlights to do. There's more stories to cover, more things to shoot, more potential for packages and stuff. So come springtime, hopefully the internship is worthwhile for a lot of people. And we hope to get a few applications that we can sift through and see who wants to be a part of ETV Sports come spring 2021.
Jared, last question. If anybody watching this show is interested, I'm talking about a student watching this show, is interested in being involved in ETV Sports for the spring, what should they do?
They can either contact one of us directors, me, myself, Ryan Gable, or Kyle Smith. I don't really have a way to show the contact information for that, but I mean, they could also look up your name on the website, and they could contact you, and then in turn you could get in contact with us. And then we'll arrange, usually we have an interview process where we'd like to sit down with you guys and ask you a few questions about, how you think you can impact ETV Sports and maybe your experience with doing a little bit of production, just to see and try to gauge what areas that you need to improve in, what you're good in right now, and then we'll take it and go from there. But yeah, if they contact you first, Bob, and then you can get in contact with us, that's probably the best way to do it.